Hey guys, welcome into the 14. I'm Nick Cole, and we're breaking down all of the Week 5 SEC football games from a betting perspective. Today, we're talking about the Mississippi State Bulldogs visiting the Texas A&M Aggies on Saturday evening at Kyle Field. This game is going to be played at 7 p.m. and it's going to air on the SEC Network. This line opened at Texas A&M -8, and it's dropped to Texas A&M -7 as of Thursday. The over-under has moved from 44.5 open all the way up to 46. I'm bringing our betting analyst, Christopher Smith. Christopher, what are you thinking about this SEC West matchup?
Yeah, Texas A&M finally got burned in a game after surviving a few close ones, and we'll see how far their stock ends up plummeting here. But why don't we get into Nick's news and notes and break down what's going on around these programs heading into the big matchup?
Yeah, sure. So let's start with some weather and injuries. On the weather side of things, we're going to see an evening kickoff in College Station, Texas. We should have temperatures in the 70s. The wind should be about 5 to 8 miles an hour throughout the game, so nothing too bad. And there is a chance of rain, but not enough that should impact the outcome of this game. Key injuries for A&M, wide receiver Caleb Chapman and Chase Lane, they both missed the last 2 games, and it's unclear if they're actually going to be able to return on Saturday. Ezekiel Jones is another wide receiver that's out indefinitely. So they're a little bit thin at the playmaker spot there at wide receiver. Offensive line-wise, they've Luke Matthews, their center, and Layden Robinson, guard there, have both missed the last 2 games, and it's still sort of unclear whether they're going to get to play on Saturday or not. A&M has been pretty tight-lipped lately on their injury situation. Into the news and notes on this game, let's just talk about what happened last week to both of these teams. Both suffered tough divisional losses in games that they, maybe were expected to win or at least could have won. Arkansas beat Texas A&M 20-10 in Jerry World, and what was the game of the week for Week 4 in the SEC. And then LSU narrowly escaped Starkville with a 28-25 win over Mississippi State, who the Bulldogs kind of put a rush on there late in the game to narrow that gap a little bit. They were down big early, which has kind of become a theme for them in a couple of spots this season. I'd just say, looking at Texas A&M coming out of that Week 4 performance, they sure do look one-dimensional to me. They have the number 2 scoring defense in the country, trail only Georgia, allowing 9.2 points per game. I don't think there's any question that they have one of the top defenses, not only in the conference, but in the nation. But where they're starting to look one-dimensional to me is like when you look at the offensive side of the ball, without starting quarterback Haynes King, you're down to Zach Calzada, and we were a couple of games into his regime here, and they've produced just 20 points in 2 games against Power 5 programs in Colorado and Arkansas. So they look very limited in the passing game. Offensive line is beat up, as we ran through in the injury list there. So this is a team that feel pretty good about where they're at defensively, but not so much on offense, which, historically, especially back into the Kevin Sumlin era, very uncharacteristic to say stuff like that. Usually it was the other way around. And then looking at Mississippi State, they've lost 2 games in a row, but I wonder how much we should be worried about that or how much is really broken with that team because, they lost against Memphis in Week 3 by 2 points, and it's kind of a fluke loss, and that there was a punt return controversy that sort of cost them late in that game. And then you look at this LSU game, where if you watched our video on LSU's game against Auburn, we kind of broke down how Mississippi State gave up 3 big touchdown passes to LSU in a game that otherwise didn't really blow them out. So you look at their 2-2 start and say they kind of got lucky to come back and win that Week 1 game, and they've had a couple of tough break losses here. So is 2-2 where they're actually supposed to be through 4 games, Christopher? Is that about what you see out of that team so far?
Yeah, I mean, they've definitely been one of the weirdest sort of box score versus final score teams all year, even in that second game against NC State, which I thought was actually much closer than the final score would have indicated. But you look at Mississippi State, and the thing that impresses me is their rush defense. They're 20th in EPA per rush. And if you look at the competition they face, EPA is not adjusted for competition. And they may be even better than that, maybe a top 10 rushing defense in the country. And I know Texas A&M may be getting back to their starting offensive linemen or maybe not. But either way, you look at Isaiah Spiller and Devin Arcane, and they've combined for 765 yards of total offense. And you look at the top skill player on the entire Texas A&M team outside of those 2, they have 765 together. No other player is even close to 200 yards of total offense outside of them. So if you're relying that much on your two running backs and you're going against a top 10 rush defense in the country, and your offensive line is not playing well at all and is also not getting a chance to work together very often and changing every week, that's not a great recipe for success. You look at Zach Calzada, Pro Football Focus ranks him 144th out of 204 quarterbacks this season. I think that's a little generous, but it also speaks to the fact that some of the blame goes to the offensive line and some of the blame even goes to the receivers at Texas A&M. But Calzada is averaging only 5.6 yards per attempt, and he's completing less than 53% of his passes. So if Spiller and Arcane get contained by that good run defense, I do think it's going to be another long day for the Aggies offense. By the way, the under is 4-0 in Texas A&M games. It's covered by 15, 35.5, 16, and 17 points. And on the other side of the ball, Mississippi State is running the ball a little bit more than they did last season, but Mike Leach, as we all know, is not an offense that's going to run the ball very often. And Texas A&M's defense, their pass defense is actually where they're really good. They're much better against the pass than they are against the run. In fact, they're second in EPA per pass on the season, and they've only given up 9 plays of 20-plus yards all season, which is tied for 5th among teams that have played 4 games already. So Jimbo Fisher is not known for running tempo. He likes to slow the game down, especially when it's going to be a competitive game. And I think based on the Texas A&M defense, what I just talked about, and also what we know about the Mississippi State offense, they're going to have success on offense. It's going to come from very long, sustained drives with a lot of very short completions and just having to execute all the way down the field against this Texas A&M pass defense. So, that leads to what I think is a pretty strong play on the total. I'll talk about that in a second, but first, why don't you tell me what you're betting on for this game?
Sure. So I have a couple of reasons of my own that I like the under in this game, which I think is where you're going with what you just said there. But number one, I learned my lessons. You guys have been watching these videos all season. You've known that if I encounter a conference total in the mid 40s, I've been saying, hey, let's just ride the over and see what happens. We can accidentally get there. Well, in my 7-9 performance last week, we clearly found that that's not always the case. And A&M is one of the main culprits of me missing those totals. Like you mentioned, they've been hitting under and under and under consistently. So I'm going to quit betting overs in the mid 40s, and I'm going to quit betting overs that involve Texas A&M. That's simple, right? So we'll go under 46 here. And then if I'm taking a side here, I like Mississippi State +7. 3 of their 4 games have been within 3 points or less. So they're always, they're right there in it. And the 4th game was a 2 touchdown win against NC State, which you've argued for several weeks now was closer than that should indicated. So give me a close game, and I'll take the +7 there, and give me a low scoring game if you could. That should get me 2 wins. What are you thinking?
I'm definitely with you on the under. I'm taking under 46 all the way. I don't see how either of these teams do much running the ball, and I don't see how either of these teams have much in the way of explosion in the passing game. And I will stick with Texas A&M -7. It's not really a strong play for me. I definitely like the side better, but at this point, all the way down to 7 against Mississippi State with the talent difference between these two teams, maybe a little too far. And I'm kind of counting on playing Texas A&M at a low point in the market right now. So Texas A&M -7 for me, Mississippi State +7 for Nick Cole. And for Nick Cole, I'm Christopher Smith for the 14, and we'll talk to you next week.